Oh, there's worse than criminal incompetence. For example, with takes on ancient history and with takes on serious subjects like slavery. Involved, I put a link to a YouTube video that's speaking about Roman history with slavery. And with American history and with people speaking about slavery, it is tactically ulterior from how our founders communicated, and with James Madison, and how our founders, plural, used James Madison's plan to force the rest of the founders. We're supposed to all understand this, but that is still being and haven't been replaced by the words they had forced. And they had to hide their actual motivations for roles with the American Revolution. They declassified this. But rather than have roles with that self-value, with our logic, in nature, no, you guys have roles self-value with that which they had to pretend because it was a breaching method that measured everyone collusions with itself or sensed everyone not, even if they were a body trying to counter it properly. It sensed everyone an extent of collusion /S against everyone else, syntactically, therefore physically. And everyone with no free speech but pretending other to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sensed and it was adapted to, including that body was a majority of people, including if it was the phenomenon of a whole country's people together. Leaving out the breaching method that came from before modern religious messengers were born. Already, we were shown by nature what we know, what everyone agrees about, the things that people agree about with history. If we pay attention, already the sciences had been systems with positive or negative appreciation, syntactically, tactically ulterior from how nature does. And they are using all exceptions, exception nature to pretend other with. So the reason Rome had roles with slavery is because the Republic had already become, from off its location, a criminal re-engineering of itself, of the function /S by the Kempis Marsyas system /S that is inseparable from proper functioning by the Republic for which we stand, and Italy stands, and other republics of the world, and exceptions. Because there are proofs that pantheism is a science to see through isms, including its own pantheism, to be and stay led by that distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature that is true always, not leaving out the slightest sequence shift, not leaving out the slightest detail. Its way. It is a body we can discern to an extent. Where and how we could discern the identity of the seasons that are not even here yet, and their increasing value even if they never get here. And where we could discern an extent of it's a body with that as a distinct identity, hyper invisible but still discernible. Two, simultaneously with it, we could discern its complete identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that, which also has relativity /hyper-relativity to a special difference. The way it does appreciates it as every other thing too. And we could change our appreciation of it as itself, but it will force demonstration /S of that. With negative value nature, progression, tax nature, and lease of Hades being for space nature transfer. This is more probably how the ancients described it. Before the sciences became criminally poor nipples, tactically delusions wrought. Anyone who pretends they can't believe the relativity of the sciences, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. Since before religious messengers were born, they will have inherent to, active to, and progressive to their logic and their nature of logic simultaneously the same thing /S. Also, how it's gotten away with, demonstrations of that, which has people mass reliant upon descriptions of history and subject treatments isolated. The subject of slavery in America isolated, for example, from the witch trials. There's a witch trials place. There's a witch trials house next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, where and how George Washington had to come to that museum and forced counter extorted, forced to bid. Founders that wouldn't have helped, and they still had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And every single person had to hide their actual motivations to an extent. And everyone had to pretend others simultaneously to an extent. Otherwise, that body would have been discerned, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was everyone from a colony, including if it was everyone from the United States, which formed from inside of more than 13 colonies that were the possession / hyper possessions of more than 3 countries. And more than that had been here and there shared, using the names of their own countries and others as systems tactile terrier from the human species body of individual bodies, with all group differences demonstrated to us, generated by that which is generating completely different species bodies too, just so we could discern it. It is inseparable as a hyper-forensics trail that shows us its identity to an extent, its complete identity's relationship to itself, and the value of that 3 ways equally increasing as the possession to, from, as, with, and for each subject, individually grouped and together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously manifest that way too. In demonstration, for example, of how pantheism was originally, led by the identity of nature that shows us it is functional, how it is a distinct identity of hyper and visible, that no other identity of volume could be, but that all are anyway. And in other words, there are questions by this and answers by this, that nature itself shows us we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time, while they are different from the other species' body's eyes, but they are non-distinct from them at the same time. We have other quality aspects in nature, limbs, consciousness, even with insects. We are shown there is to an extent, there are a bunch of scientific obligations generated by that one obligation. Scientifically, to discern the scientific value, to name it, so we can communicate about it in its parts. And if we're right or wrong with our discernment / discernment of its parts. All kinds of rackets with differences and roles with it were built to specifically to have projected criminal and citizens' natures of positive and negative, hyper additional motivations apparent even when real, to hide behind and through by a breaching method, a hyper foreign breaching method, not as names A through Z, but demonstrably it forced, checked, certain, persuaded the phenomenon of names above locations, areas, and states that could only be operated by them. It hurt, checked, forced, and persuaded them to counter that, not knowing how to do it properly and perceiving it as having come from the names with the other side of A through Z, now systems tactile terrier, from the one that is generating the differences, therefore names A through Z of the human species body, of individual bodies. Now, as systems, we are increasingly forbid appreciation of with our short words proper, therefore our long words, the protraction of the principles within our short words regarding black pupils and whites of eyes. In the hyper simultaneous, we come to sweep the syntax in the databases and the campuses of the names of the people of sciences, including the ones they went to. Clear from minds. To be led by the hyper invisible but still discernible identity of value/value progression. Again, that leads, it is all things will not by any way. In many praise, hypernated pure. We have obligations do not pretend the value of is hyper additional, hyper relative, and being haven't been communicated by nature that the sciences have been criminally born influenced, and then our founders were born. And the sciences, the databases were still criminally born influenced, tactically delusions raw. And all names in front of them were even regardless of, the great people, but as psychos, as criminally born influenced, tactically delusions raw tools from even worse, from off those locations to keep to increasingly at places with databases and then further where the sciences are manifest. And it is use of the values of each age of fact, nature's difference, being and having been used tactical terror from how nature uses it. Unnaturally, only natural as criminal and seditious nature, as nature generates it. Not as this preaching method knew. It could build suits and ties, counters and exceptions as collusions, also with the array and the differences with things as serious as slavery, too. Pretending that they can't discern that and how it is more probable, not just plausible, that the republic for which we stand in ancient times, in the campuses for which we stand in ancient times, they became criminally born influenced, tactically delusions raw, and incapable of affording to be short words by the nature for which we stand, that which is the body of that which about that why and how we have an amendment that says that we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. See, we have people that have been stacking collusion / with all natures of crime scenes since before each modern country's founding, as people who have been already roles with predicate acts with facts and with acting tied to that, and with the relativity of motivations and the differences with guilt, the way the breaching method needs leaving itself its own scientific value as a name out. Human fact nature breaching method is a scientific value demonstrated to us by nature as one of the things that are true always. What those laws were value as. Before America's founders were born, while they were born, and since they were born, and this being relative / hyper relative to where and to how in our faces overtly / insidiously they have changed the communications of our founders. Would they declassify? They have roles self-valued with uses of their words, replacing that and communicating that for pretending other for themselves, lying about their motivations for it too, not even realizing because this is being and haven't been used remotely, because it used the people at countries A through Z, remotely speaking for themselves as patriotism natures, for example. No patriotism nature speaks until black pupils, whites of eyes, and the breaching methods assignments of them and reassignments of them are discerned. Not one has learned. Each database holds lies and now should shake. In other words. But blame, we must not leave out the hyperforeign. It's recorded. In other words, that's why no one's getting giving me a response to. There's people, a whole bunch of people tied to it as a Mike Levine, also involved with the FBI and courts and more with a principal upskirt nature, and some medical offenders of kids who also attached their family members to fake conversations about the family members they were abusing, etc. Like a Leahy family has their daughter involved too with Facebook, with courts, prosecutors, and judges, including female black-white judges involved with some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, criminal enterprises next to Harvard Hospital through time, not legitimately unmarked police forms. Their roles of foreign and domestic intelligence translators, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. Their roles of criminally foreign influence at countries like Cuba too, against their own, like with psychiatry. Their roles with the prisons there. Their roles with the torture syntax, while tactical delusions raw here and there. Then they're going to bring it over there to Cuba for the torture, where they have these words, radical and extremism too. Use criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, offensively wanting and needing to pretend things are debatable that are not. Pretending things that are not debatable are that, but when they are debatable, they're not even true. Ugh. So we have to deal with the criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. Syntax by the names of the people, the sciences, and by their value. And by the appreciation of our own names and other names, by the people faking and changing their roles with how people speak about others and why and how. Increasingly, they are planting evidences as collusion / communications, racketeering, worse than war crimes. Communication is simultaneously greater than and more finite than what we say. As proofs, as like, for example, how our founders did not have free speech. You guys make that pretended debatable. And you get away with it because you're while self-valuing criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw readings of the sciences. And uses of all databases, tied locations, and tied names. And then further at the campuses where the names of the people, the sciences, and how they are actually manifest. I tell best so many ways, boxings. I teach us things. So before and after the World Trade Center attack, people from Wethersfield judicial branch offices and corrections offices have been planting predicate acts on my street and collusions as ones who've been doing intercities on and off campuses, as ones who have been doing it next to the World Trade Center, has something to do with all kinds of natures of predicate acts with facts and relative delusions at the state of Connecticut corrections offices and judicial branch offices involved with wire crimes and predicate acts with the names and names next tied to the names next to them too, like next to and different natures of conjunctions to the judicial branch offices. People with the name Oliveri, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with this, and with his educators. And their educators also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with intelligence from off the campuses, putting fake things in the databases and making everyone blame each other or ourselves and leave itself out, or that body is tortured, extorted, in fact, human nature enslaved, therefore physically. Others recorded than you guys are pretending and have pretended was recorded. WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others in the past when it was happening and since. And I can't get into branch. I've been forging and switching names with them. They have a whole bunch of different police departments and police forms involved with the same house /S. And people tied to them. A whole bunch of people tied to the name Colo and Smith near me. Involved at the same time with people that used to live here with the intelligence community, people that had conversations with them, people named O'Brien and DeSimone, involved with multiple police departments, foreign and domestic military, people on off the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices, putting fake things affecting confessions to me, refusing to get on paper since I was a kid, refusing to identify themselves legitimately into branch because that's one of the things manifest where they're being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rot. They're involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders on a mass scale. They have been preventing mandated law, preventing proper reception, appreciation. They have been preventing due processes law, interstates with all kinds of scam methods, pretending others simultaneously. All kinds of collusion with mental health care experts, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rot, readings of history, American history and past, and readings of religions. They have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rot, readings of religions. They attach me to fake communications with them about religion at Hartford Hospital, preventing me religious rights, preventing me free speech by faking conversations with me, putting me in fake transcripts, forging doctors' names to do so, also using our country remotely to pretend that there's other sides still with them and they're a side. They've never been our side. A Leahy family is involved through time, involved with identity theft frauds with foreign and domestic medical families. They got their kids involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime between the campuses too, with the names next to it. Also with the social media, whiting forensics, all kinds of digital evidences, crimes, all kinds of collusions with all kinds of natures of crime scenes in the same house /S, involved with the names of that through time. Since I was a little kid, and where they moved from too, like the ones with the name Kalal. And they shot a pellet gun at me right before, the day before the president was shot, President Trump. These people involved with Secret Service at Central Connecticut State University, people involved with intercities. That's in New Britain, Connecticut. These are people in intercities next to the campuses, involved with the same house /S, involved with Wethersfield police confessions, switching names, forging names, half on the phone, half off, and pretended I was at the police station and had conversations with police I never had a word of conversation with when I was a kid, distinctly from when I was an adult. The same ones involved with the World Trade Center attack and America's roles with Saudi Arabia, America's roles with Korea, America's roles with Laos, America's roles with all these different countries, tactical military from how they pretend here and there. They don't have possession of their identities here and there. We have been systems tactical military from the human species body of individual bodies and all differences generated by that identity of hyper difference. It shows us that we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. While it goes further about difference too. Shows us there are fish with two eyes, different than ourselves, but the same too. We're shown distinctly, not distinctly, and simultaneously /hyper simultaneously its body, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that increasing equally, which shows us the rest of its nature, the rest of its complete identity, how it stays inseparable from all parts of itself, including our own. How does your complete identity stay inseparable from a tip of a piece of a hair on your head? Even if you drop that, it stays your identity. Well, not by any way, per how it makes it. Everyone's identity is its own. And we can evaluate system here, or that system is forced from here, leaves by deeds. And nature demonstrates that, but in this breaching that employed those demonstrations effectively, right where and how it employed people pretending they need to speak for people have to have trust and identities of law. Identities who spoke about things like crimes. Forgiveness is because the names of the people of the sciences, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, the news locations, exceptions, the difference of that. They had the difference of the guilt, who's worse, when, what, that's also used remotely. Connecticut Judicial Branch offices and the Connecticut Corrections offices has a whole bunch of people sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. A bunch of intelligence there next to the Judicial Branch offices, conjunctions to it. Our people also on off to Highway, Hangdog, where it runs into Hangdog Lane, and the conjunctions to that, as their roles putting predicate acts with facts in databases with a whole bunch of different countries, and their roles interstates with triages, with the mental health care sides, where they're putting fake evidences as collusions with overt criminal enterprise, drive all these people with their differences they run in, including their sexual differences. The psychopaths walking by non-verbally pretending they're mad about things at Harvard Hospital. Involved also with the DeSimone families. I don't know the extent of it. I know they have multiple police departments, and there are roles of people with the name O'Brien and others in the area through time that Wethersfield police brought into their confession demonstration. Their roles with different arrests of people and things like that, where they're leaving out the other foreign names and hyper foreign names. Increasingly, people at Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut, and involved with the sides of it are involved on my street and next to Trinity College on the sides of it with the same house /S like Chloe and Smith, and brought up by the police confessions, and then refusing to get on paper. I've been asking, they're lying about their needs for privacy too. They're lying about what they think when we bring up their names. All exception nature, they're using those truths for lies too. These are not legitimate roles training on prosecutors and judges. There are collusions with a whole bunch of foreign and domestic overt criminal enterprise bribe ones, not legitimately pretending they're caring about unmarked police forms. Foreign and domestic, they've been using words like crimes together on off campuses. They've been using words like difference. Black pupils, it is time. We don't leave out the breaching method with blame because it's a sign it needs that. It needs other things, others ourselves blame. That's what we could observe that is why and how. Other things are being blamed when we're leaving out black people as whites of eyes. Why? How? Because other things, others ourselves. That's part of the answer. They're being blamed. Right? We're a breaching method that reassigned black people as whites of eyes. Communication is an answer. /S. So many ways. I tell it best. Until we are, as a human species body of individual bodies, we tread and we're prepared to move and to affect that which reveals evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of everywhere at once. At the same time, positive, also not as criminal and serious as nature's a positive. Otherwise, we sense and we appreciate anyone from anywhere, anything. It's a sense because that's how we make real evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. Resources, things better than easier than free. We have better and better things that we have cheap and we're paying a lot for it. We agree about a lot more regarding what we can do about. The suburbs were designed before American scholars were born. With colonists who were tortured, stored, and enslaved, they still, an extent, they were admitted that it was unsafe, and they could have, better houses. The internationally monitored conversations roles with the slavery distinctly entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. Black pupils, distinctly hurting the Native Americans, hurting the colonists. And the difference, Native Americans against Native Americans, colonists against colonists, they're watching those differences. They were watching that. They were using that. They were already creating criminal re-engineering of the databases, relativity to that, hyper-relativity at all locations with our names from some ancient times, criminally re-engineered. Uses of our name, ye species body, humanity. Again, you hear your name. Republics too, and campuses. Ooh. People will jump into our conversations and get forced this quality of back human nature. Permanently depraved and worse while pretending other. We're not going to leave out the black people as whites of eyes. YouTuber Anthony Wall. I'm going to show you how we're going to play Romulus and Remus science. We're going to force the quality of fact human nature that even the most powerful leaders have failed to be able to figure out how to get past the hyper-criminally foreign influence uses of all locations, areas, and states. Fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature. It's keeping everyone's self-value rules, keeping that outcome /S. That's why you guys can't follow mandated law. Okay, tell me the name of who disbelieves. So I'll show you. I'll start from there. I'll focus on them, their fault with the roles with this. The interbranch refusing to identify themselves legitimately, putting sequence shifts and falsified police reports and confessions that simultaneously said that they're switching the officers' names too. In other words, we're at the intercities. They use these different police forms at the same time and brought into it fake motivations for it too. As one's increasingly involved, including with victims advocates involved with a child offenders leaders of kids first force. They're using victims advocates to keep people's mouths shut and to hide why, including with sexual and medical offenders of kids with victims advocates at New Britain Superior Court. When I was a kid and now as an adult, I was ones involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, a whole bunch of foreign and domestic military and themed people. And these are psychopaths. They're supposed to be experts on such. They're psychopaths with their descriptions of all the passions and emotions and motivations, because they are screening their motivations are run by the breaching method that shows them how they already used criminally foreign influence, tactical illusions, raw predicate acts with facts in databases, collusion /as self-value at all ages and natures of campuses, and next to it too, manifest for a method that screens. This is a method that plays differences. Remember, Black people. Remember, not only we have the same different colorized projected to us by it's showing us too. We have different colorized from other species, but it's showing us about difference. In the end, it's showing us it's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous / hyper simultaneous identity relationship to itself is that way onto the parts finite, grouped, and simultaneous. For how manifest it means to discern by what, and that comes with its complete identity relationship to itself means to discern that too, and the only increasing value of that. And this is what nature's identity is wanting us to discern, where and how it is showing us the valuable seasons that are not even here yet, even if they never got here. They are increasing value this way. Here many pray. Boxing.